So, Asim, how is the Sri Lanka economic performance during the week?
The economic performance during the week is in fact a continuation of what we have seen during the last month, or the pattern we have seen over the year. And in fact, the momentum what we have noticed is continuing. And during the week, we have noticed two very important decisions coming out from external front, and especially the doing business index, where you might have seen that the Sri Lanka's position has come up by 9 notches to 89 from last year's 98. It's something that will contribute to the investor confidence, as well as overall economic momentum what we have noticed over the year. And also from another front, what we have noticed is the US GSP. And the US GSP will be authorized pretty soon, and we expect that will help us to have some exports, and thereby contributing to the current account and helping the balance of payments. But really, what we have noticed in US front is for the last 5 years or so, we are having a positive trade balance with US. Last year, it amounts to $1.5 billion, about $1.5 billion US dollars in favor of Sri Lanka. And this also one thing that we look forward, and especially will help in the last 1 or 2 months this year, and especially throughout the next year. Not necessarily from the major export to US from Sri Lanka, that is textiles, but from other exports that is gaining momentum over the last couple of months to the USA.
How about the interest rate situation during the week?
Interest rates, of course, remain very much at the levels what you have noticed last week or so, except for the fact that the market liquidity levels, it started the week around 40 billion levels, but then of course what we have noticed is comes to about 26-28 billion levels by today. But generally the call money market remain 5 to 6 basis points, about 8% overnight call money rates. And the treasury bill auctions have seen 2 to 3 basis points increase in the primary market, reflecting the kind of movement you have noticed in the overall liquidity levels. But apart from that, the overall interest rate structure, or the overall interest rate levels that you have noticed, is very much at levels you have noticed for the last 2 weeks or so.
Then how about the money supply?
Yeah, it's one front where we have noticed for the first 8 months we have seen about 20%, close to 20% increase compared to last year's first 8 months. But this in fact is driven by again the expanding economic activities, and this is very much we have taken into our considerations when we are having all the numbers and for the annual forecast. And we expect somewhat deceleration in the last 2 to 3 months of the year, and hopefully by the end of this year we'll be able to more or less come back to the overall broad money expansion targets that we have informed at the roadmap at the beginning of the year. So in fact the broad money is slightly increasing at a pace. We would like to see some deceleration, but overall we see this is due to the expanding economic activities in the country.
And during the week, we can see there are some small exchange rate changes, especially in the yen and euro. What is the reason for that?
In fact, the yen, euro, as well as the sterling pound, what we have noticed is the kind of the developments in these markets in the previous week. Those were not necessarily in favor of the eurozone especially, but it appears with the news coming out where the European countries are having a kind of arrangement to help out the economies, and this somewhat filtered in, and that helped to gain a few basis points or few percentage points, not necessarily percentage point, few inches in the exchange rate front. And from another angle, I mean the US data, which came out initially, it was gaining to some extent the previous week, but then of course the recent kind of 2 days kind of delay in US, the European countries kind of concrete plan to help out these economies have again helped US dollar a bit. But overall for Sri Lanka, the US dollar remained quite very much the same level that you have seen for the last 2 weeks or so. And the other main currencies, GBP, Euro and Yen, they gained strength against Sri Lanka rupees, and this in fact is showing the kind of the market developments what we have noticed during the week.
How about the import situation? Little bit pressure during the last few weeks. How is that?
It's in fact the momentum that we have seen in the economic expansion, where for July, I mean for the last 7 months or so, you have seen that the imports have almost come to 11 billion levels. I mean this is almost like a 48% increase year on year. Whereas the exports, which also expanded by close to 30% to 6 billion levels. And imports expansion is mainly coming from intermediate and investment goods, which are quite important in the economic expansion. And of course, within the intermediary goods, if you have noticed, I mean the main the item which contributed to the import increase is the crude oil imports, which has kind of affected by the price increase, which averaged close to 106 US dollars per barrel from last year's 77 US dollars per barrel. I mean, by looking at these numbers, the import expansion is in fact helping and in line with the country's the growth momentum and expanding economic activities, especially in northern and eastern part of the country.
From January to August, we can see some declining in rubber and coconut productions. What are the reasons?
And of course, these are quite the kind of facts which goes with the weather developments and the soil conditions, and the expansion in these traditional crops is to some extent is kind of help to kind of see the improvements in the prices. But then of course the volume wise, of course some reduction is there, and we see, I mean, this is very patternistic, and this would return back to normalcy with the improvement in weather condition.
What the tea industry, the impact of the Middle East crisis and whatever?
Yeah, it's one area where we have seen the tea volumes as well as the tea exports values to the country is impacted. But these were kind of things that's beyond our control. But generally, with the kind of diversification we see with regard to tea exports and the exporters' kind of desire to see the value addition, which will, I believe, will overcome some of the effects from decelerating exports numbers to the Middle East, and especially some impact of Syrian front where the value-added tea exports were concerned. But what we have heard recently from the exporters is that more or less the importers have been kind of discussed with the governments, and more or less they have seen that the developments have been taken looked at, and we will get the kind of the exports volumes to the Middle East as well, except for the fact that some reduction in tea volumes, production numbers, but overall the price front is cushioning out part of the decline in tea volumes from Sri Lanka.
How about the global economy and its impact to the Sri Lanka?
And in fact, the global economic development, it's very much been known and factored in. And the global economy for the year as a whole is expected to expand by 4%, and the forecast also say that the levels will remain for the 2012 also, but it's very much conditional on how the European Eurozone as well as how the US economy will come out from the latest slowdown in their on their fronts. But apart from that, due to the fact that these economies have concerned some inflows to the emerging market economies, which have been on a decline. But one reason is, probably they are more or less funding in the domestic market, and the kind of desire for sovereign instruments still remain high, and that's where Sri Lanka gained over the last sovereign bond issue, as well as some inflows into our own rupee denominated treasury securities. So in that sense, some of the developments in the international fund across the board, it's not necessarily in favor of emerging market economies where the funds were shifting back to their own territories, but overallly the preference towards risk averseness have helped to look at the government instruments, and thereby we have gained to some extent in international investments, especially to the government papers and to Sri Lanka sovereign bond. But for the stock market, what we have noticed is some of the inflows have decelerated, and we expect with the news coming from Eurozone, possible a deal with respect to helping out the slowing down economies and slowing down the industries will boost the confidence in equity markets, and this has been partially reflected in today's international stock indices, where some of the indices have gained, especially the Asian front, and will have a kind of a spillover, and we hope the momentum will return back to stock market as well.